Hemi. When you hear this, you probably think of a Chrysler or Dodge V8 engine. For Chrysler, it's a series of engines that powered their cars as far back as the 1950s, with a revival in 2003 with a 5.7 liter. The Hemi design itself dates all the way back to the early 1900s. But just because the Hemi engine is nearly synonymous with Chrysler and now Dodge, doesn't mean that other companies didn't experiment with this style of engine. In fact, Toyota mass-produced a Hemi V8 engine from the 1960s all the way up until the 1990s, and it was exclusively built for the really upscale sedan cars that were meant for wealthy Japanese businessmen who at the time were buying big V8-powered American upscale sedans. And there's a pretty good chance that you've never heard of Toyota's Hemi V8 engine, so let's get into it. But before we get deep into the Toyota Hemi engine, I think it's quickly worth covering what a Hemi is or what a Hemi engine is so that we're all on the same page. The word Hemi is just a shortening of the word hemispherical, which refers to the use of hemispherically shaped combustion chambers, which is quite a bit different from a conventional engine. Most cylinders have a flat-ish design, which, although it is cheap to manufacture and works just fine, it allows more fuel to touch the cylinder walls. This extra contact means that more heat can escape from the chamber and reduce pressure within the cylinder, essentially letting power from the fuel go unharnessed, at least in theory. Using a hemispherical design instead of a flat design reduces the volume of fuel making contact with the walls, and thus reduces power loss. Part of the reason that Chrysler introduced this design is that many automotive manufacturers were struggling to find good ways of producing more power in the 1950s. Chrysler's Hemi engines ultimately ended up dominating NASCAR in the 1960s, and it led to a lot of commercial success with their Hemi-powered road cars that you can buy from the lot. But that's a different story for a different time. So that should give you a good idea of what a Hemi or a hemispherical engine is. It's simply just a hemispherically shaped combustion chamber. Toyota was among the companies in the 1950s and the 1960s that was experimenting with hemispherically shaped combustion chambers. And more specifically, in the 1960s, they launched a flagship sedan, a very upscale car, which was the Toyota Century. Part of the reason for the launch of the Toyota Century, as we mentioned near the start of the video, was to compete with the large American cars in the Japanese market. These large American cars were very popular with wealthy businessmen, and rather obviously, Toyota saw an opportunity to offer them a big luxurious car produced right at home in Japan. With that idea though, they'd need a powerful V8 engine to compete with the American cars in the Japanese market, which is where they started the development of their new V8 engine. Up until that point though, Toyota had never produced a V8 engine, so they didn't necessarily know what they were getting into. They didn't even have a place to start. This was an all-new design for them, a totally blank canvas. Supposedly, they got their hands on a few different American Hemi V8 engines and then ended up taking them apart for reverse engineering. But as the story with many Toyota engines goes, ultimately they ended up working with Yamaha for part of the design and development, as well as the manufacturing of the cylinder block and cylinder heads. Fast forward to the 1963 Tokyo Motor Show, and a new Toyota Crown 8 was introduced as a larger and more upmarket version of the second generation Toyota Crown. And at the heart of this new car was the all-new 2.6 liter Toyota V Hemi engine, which then went on sale 1 year later in 1964. An important thing to note here before we move on is something that makes the Toyota V much different than the American Hemi engines, and that's that the Toyota V was an aluminum block design. Now this was very, very abnormal in the 1960s, and it really helped the Toyota V save a lot of weight, especially compared to its competition with the American Hemi engines. But rather obviously, there was already one major problem with this new Toyota Hemi V8 engine for this large upscale car, the Toyota Crown 8, and that's that it was only a 2.6 liter. Not a lot of displacement, which led to a pretty embarrassing power output of 113 horsepower and 145 pound-feet of torque. It's not absolutely terrible considering its displacement, but it's still pretty bad in general. Because of that, the original V engine only lasted from 1964 to 1967, when we saw the introduction of a new and improved Toyota 3V engine. With the 3V, we saw an increased piston stroke to 78 millimeters, which made the 3V a square engine. This is something we very often see in modern engines. However, a square bore stroke was not nearly that common back then. The new increased displacement helped increase power output quite a bit, up to 143 horsepower and 178 pound-feet of torque, which is still not great by any means, but a definite step in the right direction. As the Toyota Century continued to improve, so did the engine under the hood, which takes us up to 1973, when we saw the end of the 3V variant of the engine and the introduction of the new 4V variant. Yet again, cylinder bore was increased, this time up to 83 millimeters, which bumped total displacement up to 3.4 liters. And with the new increased displacement, we saw a power increase to 177 horsepower and 205 pound-feet of torque. That's right, we're now officially making over 200 pound-feet of torque. Again, still pretty weak compared to just about any V8 engine of the time, but a step in the right direction. Then again, jumping forward in time, we saw the introduction of the new 5V version of this engine in 1983. This final version of the engine was the most powerful and largest of them all, with a 4-liter displacement thanks to the 83 millimeter bore and 78 millimeter stroke. With the new engine, we also saw the introduction of overhead valves and electronic fuel injection. All of these things help push the power to 188 horsepower and 239 pound-feet of torque. For comparison's sake, the Toyota 5V had roughly about 1/3 the power of the Chrysler 426 Hemi, and granted, the displacements are very, very different. We're talking about a 426 cubic inch engine, which is about 7 liters, compared to a 4-liter engine. But still, it demonstrates that the Toyota V and the 5V specifically all just don't make very much power. The V engine really never made very much power, and Toyota actually did this for a reason. They kept the power low on this engine for a reason. Toyota put reliability above all else with the V engine, and ultimately that came at the sacrifice of power. These engines just flat out never made good power, but they were super reliable, especially compared to the American engines of the time. What's even more impressive than anything, in my opinion, is that this engine made it all the way up to 1997 before it was replaced when the Century received a major redesign and a complete switch from their Hemi V8 engine to an all-new V12 engine. And uncharacteristically for Toyota, there was never an official successor to this engine. We had the V engine, the 3V, the 4V, the 4V-U, the 4V-EU, and the 5V-EU. This was Toyota's first ever attempt to mass produce a V8 engine, and there was just flat out no successor. The closest thing that we have was their second V8 engine, which is the Toyota 1UZ, which shares nothing with the V engine or the later 5V or anything in between. And you might be wondering, well, why did Toyota never follow this up? Why did this never have a successor? Why did they just let their cool little Hemi V8 engine die? And the reason is they really had no reason to follow it up. Why follow up an engine that was small on displacement, really bad on power, and used a very old school design? We're talking about a Hemi engine. These are not used very often. It didn't have dual overhead cams. It didn't have a lot of the modern features. So why follow that up? It's almost just better at that point to start from scratch, which is how we ended up with a wildly different engine. From the 5V to the 1UZ, sure, that's Toyota's first V8 compared to their second V8, but they share absolutely nothing in common because there was just no reason to follow up the Hemi V8. It was really, really old. And with that, you might also be wondering why you've probably never even heard of this engine, especially compared to the 1UZ or really any other Toyota engine for that matter. And it's simply because the Toyota V is actually a pretty rare engine. It was only ever available in 2 applications, which was the Crown 8 and the Century, both of which were only available in Japan, and they were both upscale cars. That means in terms of production numbers, there aren't that many of these engines laying around. And because of the application and the production numbers, these engines have nearly zero aftermarket support, which meant that they were never really adopted by enthusiasts, and basically no one really cares about these engines. Sure, they're reliable, but so is nearly every other Toyota engine. So why would you go with something like the Toyota 5V when you could just go with a Toyota 1UZ, have significantly better performance and similar reliability? On top of that, Toyota is no longer servicing these engines. That means parts and gaskets generally have to be custom made. There is no support for this engine anymore. It is fully dead in terms of Toyota support. And last but not least, I think it's definitely worth noting that this is not Toyota's only Hemi engine from the time. They also had the Toyota T engine, which was a 4-cylinder hemispherical combustion chamber engine, and came in a couple of different variations throughout the years. So that's the story of the Toyota Hemi V8 engine that you've probably never heard of. And to be frankly honest, there's not all that much information about this engine online because of the aforementioned lack of aftermarket support. Very few people have tore these engines apart. There's not any aftermarket support. There's not really any clear information on how much power you can pick up or what they're capable of or anything like that. So if you have any extra info or specs on this engine, whether it be the V all the way up to the 5V, be sure to drop it down in the comments below. And while you're down there, let me know what videos you want to see in the future. Be sure to smash the thumbs up button if you enjoyed the video. Get subscribed so you don't miss out on future videos. Check us out on Instagram and TikTok, and I'll see you guys in the next one.